So I'm going to get us started. I want to welcome everyone to the Arkansas Alumni Association Lunch and Learn series. We're really glad you all could join us virtually today for this special presentation. My name is Mary Kate Harrison, and I'm the Executive Projects Coordinator here at the Alumni Association. And being that I'm a graduate of the Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences myself, I'm especially excited for today's presenters, Fulbright College Dean Todd Shields and Brian Wolff, who is a member of the Arkansas Alumni Association's National Board of Directors. So before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone to please keep your mics on mute so that we can all hear Brian and Dean Shields as best as possible. I'm going to kick off our presentation today with a quick intro of Mr. Brian Wolff. Brian Wolff graduated from the U of A with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Fulbright College of Arts and Sciences. He completed the Senior Executive Program from Stanford University's Graduate School of Business and the Master in Negotiations in Executive Education at Harvard University's John F. Kennedy School of Government. He was also a Presidential Leadership Scholar. Prior to joining the Edison Electric Institute, where he now works, Wolff was a strategist for the U.S. House of Representatives and served under Nancy Pelosi, Robert T. Matsui, Rahm Emanuel, and Chris Van Hollen. He also served as a finance and taxation legislative aide to former Senator David H. Pryor and worked in business development at Cassidy & Associates. Wolff began his career in Washington as a producer and copy editor for cable news network, what we now know as CNN. At the U of A, Wolff serves on the Arkansas Alumni Association Board of Directors and the Arkansas Alumni Association Campaign Committee. He's also a Proud Life member of the Arkansas Alumni Association, a member of the Chancellor's Society, a recipient of a gold pin as the Towers of Old Main member, and is counted as a thoroughbred for his consecutive giving to the U of A. So I'd like to give a big welcome to Mr. Brian Wolff. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Appreciate that. Thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank many of our Arkansas alumni that have joined us on the Zoom call and just our Arkansas family. But I also want to do a shout out just to our Alumni Association team and thank them for really putting these together, and our University of Arkansas team and Fulbright College team as well. So really appreciate you all doing this and putting this Lunch and Learns together. I think we're all getting so much out of them. And it's really a great pleasure of mine to introduce Dr. Todd Shields, who is the Dean of the University of Arkansas's Fulbright College of Arts and Science. And Dean Shields has been in that role. Many people I would say at the university certainly know, but in our Arkansas family don't know that he's actually been there for 26 years. And he actually started as a political science professor back in 1994. And he's been in the role of Dean of the college since 2014. He's also the founder of something near and dear to me, which is the Diane Blair Center for Politics and Society. He is the co-author and co-editor with my friend, Professor Angie Maxwell, of the Long Southern Strategy. I would also give a big shout out and recommend if you haven't read that book. It is a real moment in time and really relative to today's conversation, because it really is a moment in time of how we got here. And I think it really does complement today's discussion quite a bit. As Dean of the University College Fulbright, he represents and provides strategic vision and leadership for the largest college of the University of Arkansas. I happen to be an alumni of the college, as Mary Kate mentioned, and it's really important to me knowing how big the Fulbright mission is, because it's 3 schools and 16 academic departments, and it really provides the majority of the university's core curriculum in fine arts, humanities, natural sciences, and social sciences. But in this role, Dean Shields also led the creation of the University School of Art in 2017. And we know that's destined to be a unique world-class institution. An accomplished educator and researcher, Dean Shields' research focuses on racism, prejudices, sexism, ageism, people with disabilities, as well as public opinion, campaigns, elections, and political psychology. Really just right up my alley as far as my interest. He's been published dozens of journals, articles, and is the co-author and co-editor of several books. He's also been recognized for his commitment to student access, teaching, research excellence, sustainable growth, and diversity. Today, he's really going to discuss the contradictory, controversial, and complex historical political legacy of the college's namesake, Senator J. William Fulbright. So I want to thank you, Dean Shields, for being with us today and for leading us in this critical and really timely conversation. So thank you, Todd.
Thank you. Thanks for such a great introduction. I'm not sure who you're talking about, but thank you very much, Brian.
You're welcome. Okay, Todd, do you want to provide remarks now?
It's up to you. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, why don't you provide some beginning remarks, and I know we'll have Olivia will have some questions as well as I have some questions for you, but I just wanted you to tee up.
Sure, absolutely.
The experience so far of Senator Fulbright's legacy.
Well, I'll just pivot off of a little bit of what Brian said. I mean, I'm first of all, I'll say I'm not a historian. So those of you who are historians, just I'm preparing you right now. I'm sure I'm going to get a date wrong, or I'm going to miss something. I'm also facilitating a committee a little bit later, I believe. And so I'm trying to do the best I can to not inject my opinion into this. But what we hope to have is a very long overdue, in my opinion, discussion of Senator Fulbright and what his legacy is, and to fully open that he has some major problems in his past, some things we would disagree with dramatically today. And he's got some great victories as well. So the question is, particularly in today's world where we have continued racial divisions, and I've had several historians have said, race has been kind of our historical problem, and it's still one of our number one problems, if not the number one problem we face.
Todd, is there some way that you would you identify something, or what actions in particular really led to him being called a racist, though?
Sure. Well, there isn't really anything that Senator Fulbright said. There isn't anything that he's quoted as something that we would say, well, that's a very prejudiced or racist comment. But sometimes actions do speak louder than words. And after Brown versus Board of Education decision came down from the Supreme Court, he joined with Southern senators to sign what's called the Southern Manifesto. Senator Fulbright did attempt to water it down, those would be my words, to make it more moderate, but he failed at that. And then ultimately he did sign the Southern Manifesto, which was basically the Southern states saying they didn't think they needed to comply with the Supreme Court order. He also voted against the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And then when it came to the floor, he filibustered that act. And, a lot of people say that he had the political clout to take a stand there if he didn't believe that. There are other things in his past that might lead people to a different conclusion. Would you like me to go there, Brian? Or
yeah, because it would be really interesting to talk about what the other points of view were about his, particularly signing the Southern Manifesto and also his vote with the Civil Rights Act. How did he characterize those actions, and what were the point of views of the others that maybe have supported him doing that at the time?
So he justified those, and I'm simplifying, but he justified those as he was doing what his constituencies wanted and what he had to do to win. There is an interesting conversation in Taylor Branch's Pulitzer Prize-winning book on Martin Luther King, Parting the Waters. There's a conversation that Senator Fulbright had in 1964 with President Johnson, and Senator Fulbright says, he says, I'm over a barrel here. I wish to hell I could vote for this with you, but I can't. And Johnson says, I know, I understand. And I'm paraphrasing there a little bit, but I'm quoting as best I can. But then, later on in the 60s, Senator Fulbright's one of the few Southern senators who support Thurgood Marshall to the Supreme Court. He was a strong supporter of him. When the Civil Rights Bill came up for renewal and then extension in 1970, Senator Fulbright voted for that bill then. He supported it then.
Did he ever characterize his initial vote versus the evolution of the change of vote?
Did he characterize it?
Yeah, did he ever characterize that I voted against here, but I voted for it here? And, 7 years went by during that time period. So what did he ever say, what action or what component parts of the legislation may have been different?
Well, I believe, and I think there would just be historians that would have both sides of this, but, I believe what Senator Fulbright was saying was that he would have lost his election in '64 had he voted for civil rights. That's debated. But he did see his moderate friend, Congressman Brooks Hayes, lose an election when he came out very moderate on civil rights, and Faubus supported an opponent, and Brooks Hayes lost. So in that context, Fulbright was saying, I can't vote for this. I won't be elected. There's actually a newspaper article that Senator Fulbright, after the filibuster and vote against the 1964 Act, the Civil Rights, he's actually meeting with some African-American students at the University of North Carolina, and they tell him they love him on foreign policy, but they wish he'd be stronger on civil rights. And he says to them, I wouldn't be here if I did. And they seem to say that they really appreciated him. The one of them said, we wish we had 20 more senators like you. I think, by the end of the 1960s, you have Winthrop Rockefeller, who is very progressive on race, and the state is changing. And Fulbright is seeing maybe, and I don't know for sure, I mean, maybe he's seeing that the electoral climate's going to give him a little bit different leeway than what he thought in '64. But, Fulbright loses his reelection bid in 1974 because many people say because of the civil rights vote in '70, because of his support for Strom Thurmond, and because of his staunch opposition to Vietnam, which was a very popular war at the time in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting because it just seems to me that the complex nature of that time period, things were shifting as far as the, public opinion was literally shifting underneath us at that time over the course of that 7-year period.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because when in the Presidential Scholars Program that Stephanie Street, former president of our Alumni Association, that she runs, we go down to President Johnson's library in Austin and learn and hear actual tapes of these conversations. And so his taped conversations with Southern senators were very interesting in why they could or could not support the civil rights legislation. So very interesting that we're, historically, we're never really away from that, right? It's right. Like people really can't vote. They vote for fear of whether they're going to be elected again or not. And instead of voting, how they really feel, or in some cases, understanding how their constituents feel about issues.
Brian, may I complicate the context a little bit more even? One of the things that adds to the complication is that Martin Luther King and Senator Fulbright had some correspondence too, and Martin Luther King called him a voice in the wilderness and was very supportive of him, and in the mid '70s started feeling that the Vietnam War itself was a racial issue, since so many African Americans had been drafted and put in combat positions. So it's a very complicated history, and some people say that it's an indication that he was a racist and he didn't vote the right way. Other people say he was a pragmatist within a very ethical situation. And was there room for pragmatism? Is there room for pragmatism there? I don't know. So it's a very complicated history.
I could see that. Just back to the other points of view, placing that. I just wonder, and I'm not certainly saying that it should happen, but how much leeway do you give leaders that their philosophical beliefs about issues may change over time?
Mm-hmm.
To me, I wonder, do they get more leeway in that because they're openly going through an evolution of their own thinking with their constituents? So I wonder if those are ones that we look at differently, right? And we may view them differently in history, and others we may view in an unforgivable way, if you know what I'm saying. So
right.
I want to get into how's the campus going to decide what to do when it comes to removing Senator Fulbright's statue or renaming the college. I mean, what is the timeline on what you're thinking about that?
Well, so many institutions have, they're facing these types of decisions, and, we want to make sure we have a fair process where people can provide their input, and we do want to hear from the alumni. The chancellor asked Provost Charles Robinson and I to come up with a committee that I'm in the process of reaching out to people now, but to come up with a committee of alumni, faculty, staff, students, community members, and have a very representative group meet to listen, to hear different points of view, to talk with biographers who disagree about Senator Fulbright, to talk to other institutions who are facing similar decisions, talk to people who study race and art and what do they mean, and difference between somebody in the 60s versus a Confederate statue, say, those types of things, and then really anything else that the committee wants to hear. I'm going to be a facilitator of this. I'm going to try to keep my own opinion out. I'm going to try to facilitate free discussions with them. And then if they say, hey, we want to speak to that biographer of Martin Luther King, then we're going to do our best to try to get the statement or at least time with that individual. So I think, Brian, that if I can get everybody to agree to the committee in the next, say, maybe a week, then the following week, then I'll have the first introduction and tell them what our charge is. And then we'll start off with a meeting with faculty or students or alumni. And we'll probably start off with the alumni board and maybe some previous presidents of the alumni board and anyone else the alumni wants to include on that. Same with faculty, staff, and students. And then, we're also going to put together a web page so that if anybody wants to submit their opinions or ideas to us, we will make sure that the committee gets them. And you can submit them with your name if you want feedback, if you want to call back, or you can submit them anonymously if you wish to. So we're trying to collect as much information as we can from what the community and what people would like to do.
Let me ask you something, because clearly I have a vested interest in this, but will you have an alumni on the committee or several alumni members?
Yes, in fact, I've contacted two. I think I've got two more to contact, but I haven't heard anything back yet. It's the one thing about these Teams meetings is that it is easier to schedule a meeting, but it seems to be harder to reach people these days.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we will have a representative from all those groups.
Well, let me ask you something just along the lines of, diversity of thought when it comes to that work. I would just, and you mentioned some outreach to alumni. We have a lot of different groups within the Alumni Association in our alumni family. So I'm just hoping that you reach out to some of those groups that we have, because I think that diversity of thought and opinion will benefit the committee going forward.
I'm happy to. If you want to give me some ideas about who we should reach out to, just, I'm all ears. We can talk afterwards, or, if you just let me know, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that. And give me some idea, because you did talk about how we can sort of give you feedback as the committee starts to meet. So you've got a portal there that anybody can submit anything with regards to ideas, or, because I'm sure the committee's great and all, and your outreach will be good, but I just wonder, the diversity of that much thought, we still want a lot more.
Absolutely. So, yeah. And we also want a place where people can, if they feel more comfortable something anonymously, they can. And so I think that what we're going to do is find out actually, we could just send it to the whole alumni, but we can send a list of here's what the committee is going to do. And then you can send it out to the alumni and have the link on where they can go. And I don't know if we have the ability, but we could even put the link in the chat. I don't know if people are seeing the chat. I'm not seeing the chat, but if people could, we could even send it to the group here, but then also more generally to alumni anywhere.
Okay, so maybe Mary Kate, if you could give that to Olivia so she could post it in the chat, that would be helpful. Post that link. I think our alumni really would like to utilize that. Let me just ask you something about historically, and when was the college first named Fulbright?
So in 1980, the Stevens family gave $1 million to the college, and they wanted the money to go to fund future fundraising efforts. So they set it up to fund most of what we call today my development office. And in Fulbright, we're unique in that we don't spend hardly any academic money on fundraising efforts. But in addition, the Stevens requested that the college be named after Senator Fulbright, which I think became effective in 1981. So that's when the name came about.
Do you know what process that went through as far as how it was decided?
I'm assuming that it was very similar to today. And so, what generally will happen is if a donor, in my experience, Brian, if a donor comes and says that they would like to have something named, there are levels of naming for different things depending upon what you'd like to have named. And then there's an agreement that's written up between the university and the donor. Those go through legal and they're approved until they're legally binding. And then when both parties sign, then money's transferred, and then whatever it is they wanted named is named. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder in the future, did the university really know then that his legacy was complex and it actually might be controversial? When you say that process kind of sounded like back then it was very simple, a very simple process, and the approach was very simple. I just wonder if in the future the university might have a different vetting system, if you will, with regards to the naming of anything related to the university system, because there's a different lens, right, than there was now to 1980, now to 1964, right. A very different lens. So maybe that's something that we could look at, with the university system as far as the legal department. If that's the department that normally, and I'm sure that normally looks at legal issues around these decisions.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Okay. All right, so just for everyone on the call, the link is currently in the chat that Todd referenced, which is a feedback link for the committee that's being established. So please feel free to use that. So happy to throw any other questions out to Todd if you have any. Todd, I just had a couple of more while we open this up to the rest of the group. Give me sort of, when we talked about the timeline of consideration and what the committee might do, are you looking to have sort of like they do their work, they do all the outreach to stakeholder groups and all of these other groups, external, and then you're going to come back together? How does that decision-making process then work?
So my plan right now is to facilitate some conversations with me and Associate Dean Calvin White there. And then I want to let the group have some discussions without us there. I'm not sure that students or alumni would feel, silenced or stifled if I was there, but faculty may. And so we want to let them have as much freedom as they need and want. And we expect that they would deliberate 1 or 2 meetings, maybe more, I don't know. And when we get a recommendation back from them, we'll take that to the provost and then the chancellor, and then they'll make a recommendation to system president, and then there'll be a recommendation made to the board of trustees. And Brian, I should have even said before, but when the legal team does look at our agreements and gifts and donors and naming things, it does go to the board for approval. So there are other checks and balances that are outside the campus, but that doesn't mean there couldn't be more.
Right, right. Well, it just sounds like probably there was a very different system in place back then.
Yeah, I bet so. In fact, I believe somebody would know this better than I would, but I believe it was one of the first gifts, it's not the biggest gift that Fulbright College had ever received. And I've heard stories that the Stevens family say they came in and they wanted to give the money, and the university was like, how do we take this? What do we do? I mean, I think it was very early on for them to be thinking about it. And they're investment-minded family, obviously. But for them to give it so that the college could raise more money was very fortunate for us. I wouldn't have been able to write the proposal for the School of Art if we had just been able to just use public money. It allowed us to do a lot of things in our development office that we couldn't do otherwise.
Right. Well, give me a little bit of an idea. Just how big is the committee? I want to know for our alumni that are on this call as well, because
Sure. I mean, right now I've come up with about 10 names for students, about 10 for faculty, 10 for staff, and about 11 to 15 for alumni. Committee won't be that big, but I'm sure it'll be around 15 to 20.
15 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. So I want to make sure that our alumni know that, especially if you check the chat feature right now, you also have the link to our diversity and inclusion website. And I just wanted Olivia to be able to get that to you all as well, so you could refer to that. Tell me something, just to give me a little bit, just being the dean of the Fulbright College, and I want to go back a little bit to you really being the founder of the Diane Blair Center.
Oh, yeah.
And that work. Because I think there really is an intersection, and it's really interesting that at that time that Diane was squarely entrenched in the work of the college.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if, and I'm just kind of going back to Professor Blair's, what she probably was thinking back then, because anyone that knows Professor Blair, she was not a person that suffered fools easily, and she certainly had a different perspective, and let it be known when it comes to equality at the university. So I just want to know, wonder what she was thinking back then, when she was in that department. And and I know the strength that you got from writing the book with Angie really illuminates a lot of that frustration at the time, and a lot of that work. But what do you think that Diane would think about this as it relates to Senator Fulbright?
Okay, let me think about that a little bit. I want to jump back a little. So in 1997, Diane and I were having a conversation about the South and Southern politics, and most national surveys don't oversample the South. So a national survey that makes the nightly news, there could be 150, maybe 200 people from the South, and then if they're random sampling, which they should be, they're going to oversample Texas and Florida, right? So there might not be an Arkansan or somebody from Georgia or Alabama even included. And so the country was really trying to figure out, and has been trying to figure out, what is the South thinking, and what are the opinions of people? What are the racist attitudes? What are the sexist attitudes of the South and in the non-South? But there really wasn't a data set that would allow that to happen. And Diane said, I do not take credit for this. This is typical Diane. She said, you know, we should come up with the way to have the funding to conduct national surveys that oversample the South, oversample African Americans in the South and non-South, oversample Latinos in the South and non-South. So we really get an idea of all the groups that we really wanted to know about in the South and non-South. And I went, wow, that's a great idea. How do we do that? You know, when she was diagnosed with cancer, I remember talking to my wife and saying, you know, it'd be great to have a center named after Diane that did just that. And we were very fortunate to have a congressional appropriation that started the Blair Center back in 2001. And it's still functioning on that in books and articles, really about the South, about racism, about sexism, immigration, are being produced. And I personally love it when, you know, people from Stanford and Harvard and Yale call and say, can they have access to the data? And I say, I'm sorry, you can't, because it's a proprietary data set for the Blair Center. I get a personal pleasure out of that. What do I think that, you know, Diane definitely knew about Senator Fulbright's failings. You know, there wasn't a senator in Arkansas that didn't hear from her. If she, you know, if they were doing anything that she thought was wrong, they were going to hear from Professor Blair. I believe that she would say, and I think too for the university, particularly in 2002 when the statue was unveiled, you know, it was in response and in celebration of the things Senator Fulbright did. The opposition to Vietnam, opposing McCarthy, the Fulbright Foreign Exchange Program, which is the largest international exchange program in the world. And there are 400,000 alumni to that program, Nobel Prize winners, Pulitzer Prize winners, 20 plus heads of state, and 8,000 new scholarships every year. Just like the statue is leaning and looking at the peace fountain, I know that was, or I believe that was their goal. They wanted to celebrate that part. I don't think that anybody wanted to celebrate the other part, but I also don't think that we've been very open. You know, when I came here in '94, Brian, most students had to take American National Government or they had to take American history back then. And I think almost all of our students learned about this complicated, unexplainable in many ways past of Senator Fulbright. But our core has changed so much, and so many students come in with AP credit or American National Government or history. They don't ever take them. And so I meet students now that it might be juniors and seniors, and when they're surprised that this is in Fulbright's past, it just, you know, hits me like, yeah, we are not teaching American government and history to a lot of students that are coming through.
Well, I mean, that's a data point, right? About the program. I just want to know that how would that be perceived? Like, for example, if the statue's left up, would the information around it change, you know, to reflect maybe the contradictory, you know, complex and controversial, you know, legacy that it is?
So yeah, that's a great point. I don't think that's necessarily a dichotomy between leave it up or take it down. There's probably a continuum. There's a leave it up and then there's a contextualize it. There's a leave it up and not put it as prominently where it is right now. There's a, you know, another part of the continuum would be to move it inside Old Main. There's another part of the continuum, move it on a different part of campus, contextualize it there, all the way to, you know, there is a J. William Fulbright University of Vietnam, and that university has requested us to loan, and they're just looking at his opposition to Vietnam War. I mean, I think that's an option, you know, all the way over to we remove it and store it someplace. But I do think that those types of things are what the committee will be discussing.
Well, I think that the exchange program for Fulbright is, you know, for those of us in the Arkansas family, is historic in nature as far as an exchange program. I mean, we all know how much work goes into it, and particularly that what it takes to operate something as big as that and as successful as that's been. So, I don't envy you all having to marry up, right? You have the name on something like that, and then you have the complexity of,
Right.
of where we are now today, and how to look at these issues.
Right.
So, is there something that you see from the students that you're hearing from, that you're more encouraged by, with regards to, the university has certainly been leaning in all facets of this sort of time period that we're in, and not only the conversations that are taking place, the questions and the dialogue has just been really rich during this time. And I know that you're wanting to do the same thing in solving for this. Is what do we do with this in the most inclusive way possible? So, Dean Shields, I want to just credit you for really exploring what will be the most inclusive way for us to approach this as a University of Arkansas family. So I want to appreciate and thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for doing
That is our goal. Absolutely. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I wanted to give you an opportunity just for any closing thoughts that you had. You certainly outlined a process, and certainly outlined a lot of the complex nature of this issue and its reach, actually.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But give me an idea from you, what does success look like at the end of the day when the committee comes back with their recommendations, and you all have this, and you've gone through this incredibly open, transparent, which is so important, process. So give us your thoughts on, how you'd like to see that go.
Well, I'm an optimist, even when I probably shouldn't be an optimist. And I'm also a believer in, the wisdom of people. And I'm a big believer in people working together and sharing and being able to talk about their opinions and coming to an agreement. Sometimes it's a compromise, sometimes it's not, but coming to an agreement that is the best for the campus and the college and the campus and the state. I am not really sure who's going to be on the committee ultimately, but the people that I've at least suggested so far, I have the utmost confidence in them. I think that they're amazing people, and then hopefully we'll be able to announce next week who's on that committee. I would like to reiterate, we absolutely want to hear from everyone in the Alumni Association. Anyone that wants to give feedback, please do. I reiterate, it is going to be a transparent process and an open process, and a process for the students, faculty, staff, and alumni to make a recommendation independently. I'm going to facilitate, but I'm going to do my best not to weigh in on anything. I know my associate dean, Calvin White, is in the same opinion. So right now, Brian, I don't know what they'll recommend, but I just have a great deal of faith in these people and in this process. Like you mentioned before, I've lived in Arkansas since 1994, and Arkansas is, one of the most complicated and complex states. Going back to Diane Blair, she would say, why does Arkansas have so many internationally famous politicians? And her argument was the state is such a conglomerate of lots of different groups of people that don't see eye to eye on anything except maybe go hogs, right? But other than that, they hardly see it all. To be a successful politician here, you really do have to find ways of bringing divergent groups together and then finding a solution. As a state, we've done that, and I'm very hopeful that we're going to be able to do that again.
Well, I want to close with just one more question, because I wanted to throw you a little bit of a sidewinder.
Okay, here we go.
just to sort of wrap it up, because I want to get to the larger issue, is because you're dealing with this issue right now that probably many see that the naming of the statue are really, and issues like that are really surface issues compared to systemic racism. So give us an idea what the college is doing to help address sort of systemic racism, the larger issue, right? These are reactionary things that we have because we as a society want to be able to point out things, but yet the underlying and overarching issue is systemic racism in
Yes.
the country. So
Thanks. I appreciate that. You know, I saw an interview recently of one of my favorite scholars, Eric Dyson, was saying that he knows that statues are important, but statutes are more. And I agree with him. You know, in my own estimation, I think that statues can sometimes be what the focus becomes because they are so visible and they are very symbolic, and that's important. I'm not saying they're not important. I think that they are important. But what I do know is that, let's say we could take down this statue, we could rename things, and then in 10, 15 years, this place could still be the same. We could leave the statue up and not change the name, and in 10, 15 years, this place is a very different place, right? So 3 years, maybe 4 years ago now, Chancellor Steinmetz asked the colleges to reallocate 3% of their budgets. Now, in Fulbright College, that's about $3 million. And I asked chairs and college cabinet, elected faculty in the college, and staff and students, what do you want to reallocate $3 million to? And honestly, most of our salary is in people. So we're really reallocating people. We're going to stop doing something and do something else. And 90% of that $3 million went into two things. A diversity, equity, and inclusion office that is really transforming. Ramona West is absolutely incredible. And in that link, if you go to, you can see some of the things that we're posting up, that those are things we're doing to make this place better. And then the other part was student success. But again, even with student success, what the faculty and staff students wanted to focus on were students who were marginalized or low income or high risk or otherwise, groups that don't have a voice. And so our student success initiatives are going great in the college, but they do even there have an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. And we've now finished a year-long process where every department in Fulbright College has a diversity and inclusion statement and a plan. And we will hold them accountable to their plan. And, in some subfields like sociology or political science, studying racism is something that a lot of people have as their research focus. But in, places like chemistry or math, they at first were like, what does a diversity statement mean for us? Now they feel like, okay, we play a big role in this too. And so I feel like the campus is on a very different trajectory. I feel like the college is on a very different trajectory. I was so proud of our faculty, staff, and students for saying, if we're going to move $3 million worth of people on something, these were two things that I thought, that's fantastic. I love this place. I love these people. Let's do it. And so actually the chancellor was kind to give all the colleges 3 years to do it, thinking you could reallocate 1% each year. But the enthusiasm in Fulbright was so big, we did the whole 3%. We actually did 3.5% the first year. And so we're seeing some of the fruits of this already, because student success and diversity inclusion, those are sometimes slow games. You don't necessarily win quickly. So we're fortunate enough to have started 3 years ago, and I think you'll continue to see big changes in that regard.
That's awesome. That sounds great. Well, I want to wrap up since we're kind of getting close to 10 to the hour, which is normally about how long we spend for these lunch and learns, but want to be able to thank all of our alumni and Arkansas family for joining us today. Dean Shields, we really appreciate you just providing some context to Senator Fulbright's legacy and certainly the order and business that you have in front of you and the work of the committee. We look forward to hearing their recommendations and seeing what they put forward. So thank you so much, and appreciate everyone being with us today. And Mary Kate, I didn't know if you want to say anything or have anything with regards to a next Lunch and Learn, or you'll just be hearing from us.
Yeah, no, like Brian said, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate having you on to hear Brian and Dean Shields discuss this really important topic. It was a special presentation, and we're really glad you joined us today. We do have a Lunch and Learn series with Dean Clark of the University Libraries next Thursday, July 6th or July 23rd, sorry, at noon, just the same time as today. And we'd love it if you were able to join that Lunch and Learn with us too. But like I said, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Dean Shields. And
Thank you.
Brian.
Appreciate it. Thank you.